Welcome to Mark My Words, a show that searches for the fork in the road in life, the place where the turning point in the journey of entrepreneurship and life can be found. Let's meet each other at the crossroads on Mark My Words. When the opportunity to have a fractional CFO on my show presented itself, first of all, I had to look it up and find out what that actually meant because, as my audience knows, I'm more of a creative person and have never dabbled beyond like applied math into anything related to math or finance. Hopefully, I have good finances. I feel like I do. But basically, I had to look up what a fractional CFO was. And when I learned what it really was and what it meant, I was really fascinated with it and thought it would be a great topic to explore and learn a little bit about on this show. And I just happen to have a really good guest today who I'm hoping will educate us. He is Salvatore Tirabassi. He's a fractional CFO for CFO Pro+Analytics, and he delivers top tier financial modeling and reporting, business analytics, data science, all things I don't know anything about. But Sal is here to hang out with us and hopefully educate us. Sal, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate having me on the show, and hopefully, I can give some good basic information about fractional CFO and what it took to get here. So, looking forward to it.
Yeah, I took a look into it, and I feel like recently I talked to somebody else who had a little bit of experience with the fractional CFO world, but I planned this out specifically to really just get a good idea of what your path entailed. I mean, you're a Harvard man, first of all. You studied philosophy and foreign languages. How did you go from that to being a fractional CFO?
Oh, well, that was a very long journey. But I think the first step was coming out of undergrad and just get going into the business world. I think one of the nice things about Harvard is that it's a place where a lot of business organizations go to recruit young talent. They always have. And so coming out of there, I had a lot of different, business opportunities, and I just got kind of thrown into the business world. I originally thought I was going to maybe be a lawyer, but I came out of school and I became a management consultant. And then from there, I got into finance. In the 1999 timeframe, I went to grad school for business and transitioned into venture capital and growth equity investing, which is really the place where I really learned practical applied finance in a way that is looking at a business, its finances, to try to determine how it can make better decisions so that it can grow and become more profitable and more successful. And then from there, I eventually became a CFO for an operating company. So I was no longer just investing and sort of like sitting on a board of directors. Now I was inside helping to operate. And then last year, I started this business where I basically took all the know-how that I had developed over the years and kind of realized that I could package it into a solution that is really meaningful to companies that are between, $3 and $100 million of revenue, where they may or may not have access to the kind of the benchmark techniques, and we can sort of package those together in a bite-sized format and give them a lot of value at a price that they can afford.
So, did you know at, just any point growing up? I know before we started that and you should never just assume, I'm assuming that you were always good with numbers and juggling numbers and stuff, but was that something that even with you focusing on what you did at Harvard, did you know, like, what exactly clicked that you were like, I should take more of a finance route?
Um, yeah, I was always better at numbers than I gave myself credit for. I think that I realized that even though like I studied philosophy as an undergrad, which is, there's a decent amount of kind of like mathematical thinking in philosophy in terms of like logic and things like that, but it it was more after I graduated where I when I got into the business world that I realized that my capabilities with just being quantitative were pretty valuable. And then I went on to really kind of like double down in all of that through finance, but more so if you really want to talk about quantitative things that I do, it's in the analytics and in the data science side where we do a lot of that stuff, even like to an even greater degree. Finance is a lot of basic math, at least when you're dealing with corporate finance. But you are like really thinking about the right way to analyze information. The math part is easy. It's more kind of like thinking about what problem are you trying to solve, or what is happening in a business that you want to improve, and you want to be able to look at the information and analyze it in a way so that you can make a good decision based on what your reading of the situation is. But I guess I kind of just was always quantitative in one way or another, and I really discovered that that was something that I was good at once I got into consulting right out of college.
And sometimes the answer to what we should be doing with our lives is right in front of us and we don't see it. Because I know that I've always liked, talking and I always advertise myself as a good listener. So I feel like, yeah, I have to talk, I have to host, I have to prepare and ask, hopefully good questions. But you also have to be a good listener to run a show. It's not just about talking. I think a lot of people think, oh, it's just talking. No, it's like preparing. I would never come into this episode and just be like, well, he's a fractional CFO, and that's the long and the short of it. Like, I actually did my homework. I'm like, all right, what am I going to actually like talk about and ask? And I basically, with all my guests, I try to listen. So these are all qualities that I've had my whole life and have been using, but I finally figured out like a good way to put it all together and apply it to something, and it was right under my nose the whole time. And I'm just kind of rambling on a little bit here, but yeah, it's just interesting to hear how this evolved for you. That's cool. So,
Yeah, it wasn't the the path from consulting to finance was pretty straightforward, I think, in a lot of ways, but the path to becoming a fractional CFO after that really also occurred, and it was natural for me because as a fractional CFO, I do, while my team and I are operating inside a business as part of their team, we are really actually acting as consultants in a lot of ways. And so that path is really connected to like my original professional training. But the other thing though that is interesting, not just about the fractional CFOs, but this whole concept of fractional executives. is that it really was enabled, actually, I feel, during COVID, because the fractional workers now have a lot more credibility working remotely, and people and business owners are more used to working over Zoom and being able to communicate over video. And so that really, I think, opens up a lot of opportunity for a fractional executive to try to build a consulting practice and not have to be stuck in their geography. They can market and attract customers from all over the world, basically. And so the whole evolution of the gig economy with video and people becoming more confident about being able to outsource certain capabilities that they need is one of the things that also happened just before I decided to do this, and made
Yeah.
it easier for me, quite frankly, to try to build a business.
Oh yeah, I can imagine that this was like the absolute right time, not only in your life and career, but just in the world for anybody with your background to kind of take that same look and you know break off and try to expand beyond just where they are. And that's, I mean, if I were you, I definitely would have, I'm sure I would have considered it. Although I, again, will never make an assumption, although I guess it sounds like I am. But one thing I do want to ask you is that you kind of put it here that you left the prestigious world of private equity for a more hands-on role. Was that intentional? Did you know it was going to be like more hands-on? Did you think it was going to be about the same? What motivated you to make this change in your life?
Yeah, it was a new challenge that I wanted to undertake. And I did always feel like when I was an investor that some of my capabilities in terms of like being an effective communicator and being able to really help make decisions more in real time was something that was those capabilities that I had were better utilized actually in a business that was making decisions day to day, and actually building a team, being able to mentor people more closely. Because as a private equity investor, you are, um, connected to your partners in the partnership, and then you've got your relationships with the companies that you invest in. But um, you know, the actually building your own team is not necessarily something that is part of that package. And for me, that was, um, something that I really wanted to do and that I really enjoyed quite a bit. In fact, in my fractional CFO practice now, a bunch of the people that, work for me come from my previous experiences, where I've maintained relationships, and they were members of my team, either as direct employees or other consultants that I worked with, and they really latched on to some of the things that I do, and they like working for my new firm. So I think in that respect, the whole testing out of how I was as a team builder and kind of being an effective leader, really panned out, and it's paying off now after all those years, because I've got people who come back to me and say, "Hey, I'd really like to work with you again."
Wow, what an advantage for you as an entrepreneur to have all of that to your disposal, like right out of the gate. I talk to a lot of people who they talk about how hard it is to let go and delegate and the learning curve that comes with starting up your own business. And I'm sure there were obstacles somewhere and learning curves for you. And yeah, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah, definitely. I mean, the it's developed very quickly for me. I would say right now I'm at a growth stage where my so a lot of my clients come from my network, and a lot of the people that work on my team come from my network. And I'm at the stage now where um, I'm starting to think about how do I expand client acquisition and team building outside of my direct network. And that actually is a tough challenge. And I think some entrepreneurs encounter that much earlier in the process, right? Because they're not necessarily able to leverage a large network to get clients or to acquire, I'm sorry, build relationships with employees or subcontractors. And I had the luxury of having both of those things kind of roll along pretty efficiently for me. But at a certain point, as you get bigger, that whole the gas in that tank starts to get consumed, and you need to start looking at other channels for both of those things. And I'm not quite there yet, but I'm getting closer, and I think about it a lot. Recently I've been interviewing a few different B2B marketing agencies that specialize in working with B2B services companies like mine. And I'm just talking to them and learning about how they go about their business and what their success criteria have been in potentially working with a company like mine. So I'm in the early stages of that. And then eventually I'll be doing that on the personnel side too.
Wow. That's I mean, that's just amazing. I don't even know what to really say because usually when I have these conversations, I there's some kind of like real obstacle or something going on that somebody has to get over, and it just kind of sounds like you. I mean, that this is just coming from somebody who doesn't know this world very well. I mean, what does like your day look like as a fractional CFO? Are all days different? Are they similar?
I can tell you like what my day was like yesterday and what it was like today. So yesterday I had a couple of different client projects that I worked on, and the big thing for yesterday was that a couple of members of my team completed a pretty late draft of a very sophisticated financial model for one of our clients, and so I spent some time yesterday going through that. And there's some tools that I use for just auditing spreadsheets, because when you build very large, sophisticated financial models, you can inevitably have um, uh, some small errors that creep into the model. And unlike, writing software, where if you write software, typically the bugs reveal themselves, or the software doesn't work. I mean, I'm not a coder, but I'm just saying, like, I've worked with developers who built software, and so the code doesn't work, and then they go in and they realize, oh, there are certain bugs in there, I need to fix them. In a spreadsheet, in a large financial model, the bugs don't necessarily reveal themselves, especially if there's a lot of information that you're pulling out of it. And so I spent a little bit of my day auditing that model to see if I could find any issues with it. And then I actually yesterday I interviewed two of these marketing agencies that do the B2B marketing that I mentioned. Today was a little different. Today I'm actually on site at one of my clients, and we worked on slides for capital raising. They're looking to bring some investors into their business. And then we digress into a conversation about tariffs, which are really going to affect the way they have to operate. It's kind of a crazy thing that's happening, and the concept that um, these are taxes that have no impact is just not true. I mean, in the business, the thing that we talked about specifically today was how the tariffs effectively were wiping out the total gross margin for a whole set of their products, and they have to talk to their partners about increasing pricing, which means that they're just going to sell less at the end of the day than they did yesterday. So we went through a bunch of that. I also today posted some case studies on my website. So I have a web developer in India, and you're talking about the gig and remote workers, right? I leverage them too. I've got a web developer in India who just put together a page on some uh, case studies that are going to go up on my website. In fact, they may already be up there. And then this evening, I'm going to a March Madness event with other fractional CFOs from the Connecticut area. So today's a pretty busy day.
Well, the last part sounds like fun, and I wish I
Yeah.
could come. But one thing that you talked about there that I think might be a good segue for me is I know you've been dealing, even before we started recording, you talked a bit about the tariffs. So I'd be curious to know your perspective on what entrepreneurs and just people in general, from your perspective, are, what's in store, what you think they can expect under the current presidency 2.0.
Yeah. So the tariffs, I think, are a real issue. I think that the economy is definitely slowing down. It was slowing down, coming, into the beginning months of the presidency. Um, and tariffs basically are just going to slow down demand. And slowing down demand doesn't, we may think that it has an impact on, say the Chinese economy, which, if the president is taking an adverse position to the Chinese economy, tariffs are one way to do it. But on the other hand, there's a lot of product that gets sourced from Chinese manufacturers that it goes through a whole value chain in the United States, right? It's businesses, small businesses like my client who manufacture things in China and then sell them throughout the United States at competitive prices. Once the tariffs go into place, it's going to change the demand profile, and consumers are just going to afford less. And that, given where the economy is, because I don't feel terribly confident about not tipping into a recession. I think that could be the thing that really tips it over. And I think that's why the stock market really has had a rough go of it these last few weeks, because the market has got plenty of smart people that are in there, trading to make money, and they think through all these things in real time and kind of play 5 to 10 moves down the chessboard, and that really gives you an indication of it. It may not even be uncertainty. A lot of when the stock market came down, there was a lot of people saying, "Oh, it's because of the uncertainty," And I would say, well, maybe it's not the uncertainty, maybe it's the certainty that if these things happen, the economy is going to roll over. Um, so I would say for entrepreneurs and that are out there, I think be diligent and nimble with how those tariffs are affecting you. And if you see it as an obstacle, try to figure out from quickest to implement to hardest to implement all of the actions that you can take to avoid the full impact of that tariff on your business. There's probably some stuff that is relatively easy to do that's going to give you some value, and then there's stuff that maybe may take longer planning. But you should plan those out. You should think about them and not just think about them. When you're having lunch and writing a few things down, but find a time to dedicate a few hours to really develop a plan for yourself, because you need it. Otherwise you're going to be reactive, and reactivity in a business, especially an entrepreneurial business, is not a way to operate effectively.
I agree with that. I mean, I know, first of all, hearing everything you just said makes me feel good, at least about my gut, because I don't know much about anything, but I do follow the news and I follow the stock market, all, albeit as a person who is not a numbers person, but my gut has really been telling me, like, something, and I don't know exactly what that thing is, but I just feel like something is going to go down. I know there's been a lot of talk about, the possibility of a recession. And
Yeah.
I mean, my day job is a job where I basically, I've been working in television for the past 20 years. I do quality control and I've done a lot of different things, but the past few years I've only been focusing on commercials and advertising. And in that regard, I have seen a little bit of a change in like how much I'm seeing come in.
Come
And
in. Yeah.
I don't know if that's like foreshadowing to what could come down the pike or what is actually going on now. Um, One thing I can ask you is, with all the talk of tariffs and everything going on, where do you feel will be like, is this going to have a good resolution down the road? Or the tariffs even worth it? You're laughing right now. I'm going to let you talk.
Um, I just there's probably one of two scenarios. The tariffs get implemented and nothing changes. Then we're just going to live in this tariff world. I think that if the economy rolls, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be upset, and there's going to have to be some reaction to that. So, um, I feel like you mentioned that you watch the news and you try to stay abreast of these issues. I watch CNBC. I watch some of the evening news channels just to kind of get caught up. I think one of the problems, and maybe this is a helpful message to get out to your audience, is when I'm watching like CNBC and I'm say you've got like the CEO of like Target or something like that on CNBC being interviewed, and they ask him about tariffs. The discussion is very informative, but it's also on such a scale of the concepts that it doesn't necessarily resonate with like the day-to-day average American. But for me, I'm working with regular Americans in these businesses who own these small businesses that I help them with. And so I get to see what it's like for the little guy. And you know, when I say little guy, yeah, these are businesses that, you know, may have tens of millions of dollars in revenue, but which may sound large to some of your audience, but this is, you know, the bread and butter of the US economy, you know, are these small businesses. And you know, when I if I tell you that, like, I just looked at a bunch of, you know, revenue sources for one of my clients, and the tariff wipes out all of the gross margin. You know what that means is that when if they continue to sell these products at these prices, there's zero profit. In fact, they're losing money on them because the gross margin is what pays for running the business. So you have your revenue, you pay for the service or the product, you have your gross margin, and then that pays for salaries, rent. If you're borrowing money from the bank, it pays your interest. And I'm just saying, like, I am literally looking at examples of where all the gross margin disappears because of the tariff. And that's different than the CEO of Target going on CNBC and saying a similar message, but a little bit bigger idea, right, about how it's going to affect demand and how it's going to do this. But I'm talking about, like, what an entrepreneur who, you know, shows up at 8 in the morning, is done working at 7 at night, goes home to have, you know, dinner with their family, and you know the conversation at the dinner table is, oh, I just got my tariff code from the duties broker, and 15% of my products will no longer be profitable unless I can increase my prices. I mean, that's like, you know, that's like dinner table conversation for people. It's not, you know, it's not the Target CEO saying we're foot traffic is going to go down in, you know, my 5,000 locations. They're both the same. They're both coming from the same place, but one of them is much more real, I think, to people. And that type of story may not make it out to the news, but that's where it's starting. It's starting there.
I love that you brought that type of topic up because I feel like that's kind of an issue with our world and maybe like our country is that certain industries have gotten so big and there's like all these sources of news now, and I feel like there's such a focus for as much as we have like podcasts and things for uh, the little guy to put themselves out there more. There's so many tools. There's also a great focus on people who have the means and have more money than they know what to do with. And you don't hear enough about stories like, you know, mine or the people that I've had on this show. And I mean, I wish that somebody or somehow our media or whatever it is that it's like kind of hard to pinpoint what could change that, but I wish that that would change because I think if that would change and people would see more just the day to day of what it's really like to like run your own business. And yeah, you have people that are up here, but there's a lot of people hovering in the middle or down that we need to learn more about. And, it's definitely creating like a different, like, I guess for a lot of people, a different viewpoint of what's really going on. And yeah, I think that was a great point that you just made there.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's important for people to think about that and realize that, you know, and hopefully it'll get covered in the broader media or in whatever social media people are consuming these days. But we'll see. We'll see. It'll be an interesting. The next 90 days will be very interesting.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. And speaking of the little guy, and hopefully being with you on this segue, you talk a little bit about your definition of success evolving through this transition and surprising lessons that you've learned. And I know I'm kind of grouping a bunch of stuff into one thing here, but
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that.
I think one big lesson for me is that I've always been like a kind of give to get person without any expectations. And in building the business, I found that, my willingness to just provide free advice or really listen to other people's situations and or provide certain contacts that I may have in my network really, does have first of all, it's very satisfying to be able to do that as a person, but then, it also has a way of coming back to you in goodwill. And I kind of have always known that, but I think now that I'm running my own business and I'm networking a lot more day to day, um, I also get to see a lot of the direct impact that we have with businesses and how appreciative the owners are of the work that we do. That you can really see that um, virtuous cycle of like paying it forward, getting it back, and going through the whole process all over again really does have value. And I think if you're thinking about starting a business or going out on your own, you obviously, I'm not talking about giving away your services for free, but I'm talking about more in terms of like networking and relationships that you might have that can bring business to you or you can bring business to them. Those are really good opportunities where that paying it forward and, having like some sort of memory of like different individuals that could benefit from something you just learned or something that you just came across, that type of information sharing and building of relationships is helpful. It's a real thing, and it takes a little bit of attention that you need to keep to have it sort of in the back of your mind that you want to keep doing it, but that definitely works.
I can't stress enough the idea of networking because without networking, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now, and I wouldn't be doing a podcast. I mean, I started doing this all because I started going to something called LinkedIn Local in the DC area when I lived up there, and I guess we had one meeting that focused on creating content. This is like in 2017, I think it was. And for me back then, I was like, oh, I don't make content. I don't have the right sound. I don't have the right look. Nobody's going to watch my stuff. But people kept encouraging me. They were like, hey, you should like make some content or whatever. I don't really remember what the context of those conversations were, but I remember the encouragement. And that's how I kind of got started. I started posting stuff and people were, giving me positive feedback on my content. I'm like, wow, this feels good. This is cool. People started telling me I should think about doing a podcast. I'm like, well, who in the world wants to listen to me do a podcast? But I like to talk, and I've always had it in my gut that I wanted to like do something like this. I just always thought of myself more of like being a behind the scenes kind of guy. So, basically, long story short, I started doing it and I found a good concept. I just decided to dedicate it to entrepreneurs because they were the ones who were encouraging me. They were the ones I was networking with. And, now I'm over 100 episodes in and I love it. And I've met all kinds of people through doing all these episodes. So I don't know if that teaches anybody anything, but I can say that just a little bit of networking that I did in the very beginning planted the seeds to what is now me being like super confident talking in front of a mic or behind the mic, I guess.
Hmm.
And it can really grow. You never know, and it can really turn into something.
Yeah, no, for sure. I agree 100%. Networking, you, it's never too soon to start, is kind of what I would say. Never too soon to start.
I'm with you. So as we know, again, I'm a person who would never even think about becoming a fractional CFO. Uh, but there might be people out there who might be qualified to do it, and they haven't even thought of it. Although it's 2025, and based on your story, I'm like, man, I can't imagine who wouldn't think about it if they had your background. But maybe they haven't. I mean, who should be thinking about taking on um, a fractional CFO firm?
You mean in terms of like what my clients look like,
Just
or is somebody who wants to become one?
someone who wants to become one. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, yeah. I would say there's two tracks, right? There's the accounting track, and then there's the finance track, and then there's some people who cross over in between. I think that accountants have a distinct advantage in some ways, especially if they're in the have done some audit and tax work with small to medium sized businesses. Um, they can kind of deal with a lot of the day to day issues that entrepreneurs in emerging businesses might see. The one of the disadvantages that they have is that they're not necessarily like forecasters or business problem solvers. Um, Folks that come more out of finance or consulting are really looking more ahead and are problem solvers. And the accounting piece I find is not a necessary component to be successful. It's a great thing to have knowledge of, but the way that I look at it with, I mean, I know enough accounting to do everything that's necessary and can have pretty sophisticated conversations about that. But I know that that's one piece of the puzzle that if I didn't have the expertise, I could always find somebody else. But the skills that you need to do financial forecasting, financial modeling, strategic discussions, being able to tell storytelling is a big thing when it comes to dealing with outside investors. You want to give them a picture of what this opportunity looks like. And it's a picture that the CEO of the company buys into and can also articulate. All of that stuff comes out of the finance and consulting world and really requires an understanding of how does this business turn on itself to make profits? And so when you come out of the finance world, you have more of a distinct advantage overall, I would say, in becoming a fractional CFO. But that doesn't mean that you can't come out of accounting and try to do it. You just need to get into the forecasting side as quickly as you can. Um, you know, do a lot of financial modeling. Try to have a consultative approach to the client that you're working with, in whether you're coming from finance or accounting. And those are like the key ingredients. Remember, at the end of the day, you're an advisor who is trying to grow and make the business more profitable, to walk into a meeting and say, like, let's take the tariff example again, right? To walk into a meeting and say, I looked at the numbers and there's no gross margin in 15% of your products. That's an accountant can do that, a finance person can do that, but the key piece is, okay, well, what are we going to do about it? Right? That is the piece that makes you more effective as a CFO. What are we going to do about it? And I have some ideas about what we can do about it. That's where you really add the value. You have to
Well, so,
see and then solve.
sorry, I like cut you off there. I thought you were done. But Sal, this was like really educational. I'm glad that I took the leap of faith and had this conversation because this is literally something that I know very little, if anything, about. And I loved hearing your story and your perspective. And yeah, I don't envy the position you're in with the tariffs, but I can give you the floor to tell everybody how they can find you, how they can work with you, and anything else you want to share.
Yeah, sure. So my company website is cfoproanalytics.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. And I do have a Substack blog where I write different types of finance and analytics articles. You can connect to that on my personal website, which is my last name.com. So Tirabassi, Tirabassi.com is where you can find that.
All right, sir. Well, thank you very much for being on Mark My Words today. I appreciate it very much. I am Mark Schmidt, your host. This was Salvatore
Yeah,
Tirabassi.
you can call me Sal. That's cool.
Yeah, I was gonna like get on this call and just go right into Salvatore. I'm like, no, even like in his intro video, he says call me Sal. So I'm
Yeah.
going right for Sal. But I thank you for being on Mark My Words. Thank you for being here. Thank you all for listening. I will end the episode since I'm getting tongue tied. Thanks again. Have a great day. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to go on a journey with me into entrepreneurship and life on Mark My Words. If you would like to learn more about me and the show, you can find me on LinkedIn at Mark Schmidt or connect with me on Instagram at Nimrod79. Video episodes of Mark My Words, as well as other content, can also be found on the Mark My Words YouTube page. Entrepreneurship can be quite the roller coaster ride. It can be a bit isolating and intimidating, but it doesn't have to be that way. Let's meet here next time at the crossroads on another episode of Mark My Words.